Hey listeners, powered up by Mazer Group, this is the Turnin Dirt podcast. I'm your host, John Mazer. Good afternoon, Harry.
Good afternoon.
How are you?
I'm great, thanks.
Good.
Pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to have you, and thank you very much for joining us. It's an exciting episode because, as I said before, I've always been interested and intrigued in, the valuation of land and farmland, because that's all we're doing here, right, is selling to the farmers. So really appreciate you having you. To get things started off, I just interrupted a conversation so we could get the mics going on your origins and where ground zero was for you. I'd mentioned that Pops was born in Radville, Saskatchewan, but the farmland, or the homestead, was in Amulet, which is right kind of where you were. So
about 3 miles down the road from where I was born. I was born in Pangman, and Amulet's right next door. So
there's not much left of it now.
No,
I think it's just one of those statues or whatever it is. Yeah,
I believe so. Very little. But at one time it was a thriving community.
Yeah,
there's a lot of other communities, but
there was a bunch of, I think a couple of grain elevators there, general store, that sort of thing, and
good farming area. Good land. Good productive land. And
you mentioned in your submission that you grew up on a mixed farm, so obviously that was in that area.
Yes, it was,
so let's start it from there, Harry, like kind of your upbringing and how you got into ag. So it was a mixed farm, and was it a generational farm, or was that where your folks?
Granddad came over from the UK, I guess in 2000 or 1907, I guess it was, and got off the train at Yellowgrass, Saskatchewan, and came across the prairies to his quarter section of land just north of Pangman, and homesteaded. And so I'd be the third generation.
Okay. What year did they homestead? Do you know?
1907, I believe.
07?
Yeah,
okay.
07,
I've got a couple of stories on here that go back into like the late 1800s. Okay. But I checked out, I don't want to sound morbid, but when I did drive through Amulet, I checked out the cemetery for some Mazers in there, and the dates go back pretty deep. So Wow. So growing up on the farm, it was a mixed operation. So I had cattle, and we're doing some grain.
Yes, grain and beef. Yes, for sure. And all other things go with it: chickens, hogs. You know, turkeys, geese, all works.
Everything that a self-sustained farm would have, right?
Yes, gardens.
Good stuff. Right on. So working at the farm with the family, all that kind of stuff. You had mentioned that at one point you got into real estate. So did that happen in the area, or did Harry make a move to the big city of Regina, or how did that evolve?
Well, I made the move to Regina for sure.
Gotcha.
You bet. Became a member of the Association of Regina Realtors and Saskatchewan Realtors Association, and sold houses and farmland. And I always say I was in my 20s, and so were interest rates. And it's a fact. Rates were in my low 20s, and I was in my low 20s. So I didn't know any different. It was just kind of normal, right? So sold quite a few houses and farms, and then got out of it. I think 83 I went to Weyburn, Saskatchewan, and worked with a firm there for about a year. And I guess I didn't see the future, and so I just went kind of full-time farming and with Dad. And then in 2010, actually, my wife introduced me to a gal in Regina that was building new homes, and things kind of evolved from there. So that's 14 years ago now. And but I sort of cut my teeth with real estate and farming real estate back in the early 80s. So that gave me this base that I when we started in 2010, it was a great base to build on.
Yep.
And I think that's part of the reason why things kind of have evolved and taken off the way they have. Is the start I had back in the 80s.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and with that start, obviously any exposure to ag is good, but was that your introduction into, the land value and the whole process of ag realty?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
It was. Yeah. I was introduced to some people in the industry that were selling farms, and so I learned quite a bit. And having said that, it was more understanding of how the real estate industry works, and I think was a combination of the two. Learning more about ag real estate, but my agricultural background, like actually growing up on a farm, being in farm business, and then being in the real estate business in the 80s, all set the stage. When 2010 rolled around, it was like click, just things really kind of took off well, and we're really thankful for it and humbled. And so it's been a great run for 14 years, and family involved. And so,
you betcha. So 2010 is, and take me back here, 2010 is when you got back into real estate, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So I don't want to say I'm dating myself here, but that was kind of I guess it was just after the recession in the States. So were interest rates at a kind of record low at that point, were they not?
Sure. It was. So in the recession in the States, kind of was coming out of it in 09 and 2010. And about in 2010 is when things really took off again. I mean, we didn't seem to get as adversely affected here in Saskatchewan as a lot of places did. I mean, we kind of sailed through that recession, but and farmland values kind of went sideways. But then once things started to open up, they popped. And
that was it. Yeah,
that was when the values of Saskatchewan farmland really started to escalate. It was right after the housing crisis in the States.
Gotcha.
And, and interest rates were, well, they've been up and down some, but of course, now they're higher than they've been before.
In a while, yeah. Hopefully that corrects a little bit, but I mean, still affordable at the same time. But I guess on that note, the farm size and operation size are getting much bigger. So along with your entrance back into real estate and farmland, at that point, did you see a spike in the smaller farms? Whether it be selling off to bigger corporate farms or just selling off to a neighbor, that sort of thing. Was that a time when a lot of that was happening?
It was already happening. I mean, it's been evolving. It's been happening ever
Absolutely,
since the settlers ran into the 1930s, and there was no crops with the droughts and the dust bowls. But in 2010, there were lots of mom and pops. There was pent up selling demand. I'd say people had been one of the first farms we sold. 25 quarters, wonderful people down at Kayville, not too far from Amulet and Pangman. They'd been trying to sell their farm for a number of years. In fact, quite a few of the first people I dealt with had been trying to sell their farms for a number of years. There were no buyers. So,
no kidding.
Yeah. So it was like all of a sudden we got investors. We got, not so much farmer buyers that time, because I think a lot of the farmer buyers are still pretty concerned that the investors were paying way too much and the land would be coming back on the market and they'd buy it for 50 cents on the dollar, which doesn't happen, of course. But there was pent up selling sort of capacity there was inventory available for people to buy and prices, of course, were a fraction of what they are now.
Nice. So, go ahead.
So sorry, when you say pent up seller demand or people wanting to sell, what was slowing that market earlier on? Like, what was their barriers that they were getting from selling? When we say there's no buyers, why would that have been taking place pre-2010?
Not that there weren't any, but there weren't as many. So the demand just wasn't as strong, and there was a lot of supply. I mean, we went through the 80s, which was brutal. I mean, the Western producer was full of land for sale.
That's crazy.
All the banks, the farm credit, the credit unions, they had long lists of land that they had to take back from people that couldn't keep their commitments, right? So that was in the 80s and 90s into the 2010s. That's a long period. We're talking 3 decades, right? To kind of there was just so much supply and very little demand. But when the legislation changed in 2003, I believe it was 3 or 4, the provincial legislation changed. It would allow buyers from you could live outside of Saskatchewan and still own land. So that was the big impetus for change. That's when things got started. About 5 years went along after that, and then the recession hit. So then things idled sideways. Not as much demand, still lots of supply. So then after the recession ended, things are looking better. The demand, and of course the story started to get out around the planet, I believe, that Saskatchewan land was ultra cheap and there was lots of it. So So that was kind of, there were a lot of people that were looking for someone to buy their land. Now it's the reverse. Now we have a strong seller's market.
That's right. So, So, I mean, if you're willing to sell, and then there's buyers out there. Yeah. It's from a land value standpoint. I'm going to kind of give you a 2-pronged question here. One, obviously the value of land has gone up from the 80s until now. So the first question is, I guess it was just obviously with inflation, that sort of thing, as a reason for that increase. But also, did the value of land reflect, how do I want to word this here? Did the value of the land reflect the farmable acres on the land? Like, I know there's a lot of our customers that are actually creating more farmable land by, pushing down bush, that sort of thing. So I guess that would be my first question. Did you see an increase in farmable land? And also, how would you, actually, let's start with that one. Did you see an increase in farmable land, from the 80s until now?
So in the 80s, when it was farming, like cropping was very unprofitable. Let's put it that way. a lot of land got ceded to perennial, so it was ceded to tame hay, grass. So,
Yep.
and then people would graze it or they'd cut and bale it rather than trying to crop it and make money. So,
Yep.
so what we've seen since then is a lot of that land coming out of grass and into crop production. So that's increased the number of total farmable acres.
Gotcha.
And then also a lot of draining,
Yep.
improvement to the land. So cleaning up old yard sites, cleaning tree lines out, fence lines. And then some areas, if it was treed with, but good arable land, they would, be, and that's still going on today.
Absolutely.
Especially as guys buy land, so the folks that have owned it for, let's say 50 years and had cattle, let's say a lot of them don't do those improvements, but when someone else acquires it, either a neighbor or an investor, they'll typically clean it up and make it more usable, so there's more acres. Yeah,
gotcha. Do you see any? Of like? Let's talk about, because I know what happens in Manitoba, but for Saskatchewan, we had a conversation in our last podcast about regenerative crops and moisture retention, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. I know in Manitoba that they're doing a lot of in-ground tiling, which is where they throw the perforated tubes down and they actually have a drainage. Do we see any of that in Saskatchewan? I haven't seen any of that. That's why I'm asking.
There's a little bit. Yes. Yeah. There's. In fact, I had a conversation yesterday with a fellow he's actually from Ontario, so he's very used to tile drainage in Ontario, and he's the own land out here, and they're actually, they've applied for drainage permits and whatnot, and they have the permits in place.
Gotcha.
It's definitely not very common. Most people, too little water is usually the problem.
Exactly,
but in cases, and part of the problem is if you have land that's worth $40,000 an acre in let's say in southern Ontario, it's only worth $6,000 here. The cost of drainage is roughly the same. The cost of buying the pipe and laying it is the same. So if you're improving really valuable land versus valuable land, then it makes more sense to do it,
absolutely,
there instead of here. So I think we'll see more of it though. I do think we'll see more of it. It's very good. It helps reduce the salinity. It can actually improve soil quite a bit with it and improve the efficiency, so you don't have to drive around low spots.
That's right. Yeah.
So,
So even in the areas where there maybe isn't as much moisture, it still benefits the overall quality of the land.
It can. I think it's got a lot to do with the value of our land. You can go out and buy an acre, almost as cheap as it costs. I don't know exactly what the costs are. I haven't looked into it lately, but it is quite expensive to tile land. So if your land that you're tiling isn't all that valuable, well, you might as well take that money and just buy another acre. But if you can't buy those acres, or if they're really expensive, then it makes way more sense to tile it. So
Right. Going to go back a little bit to what you said about, having an acre of land that's worth 40,000 in Ontario and say, whatever the cost is here, 1,000, 2,000. What determines that value? Now, is it surrounding, with the ability for urban sprawl closer to centers? Kind of what are all the factors that make that, give it that number?
So let's say around Regina, if the rough price plus or minus of a high-end acres, let's say $6,000, and in southwestern Ontario, let's say it's 40. So why the spread, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's a good question. Part of it's scarcity in Ontario. There's so little of it, and there's so much value add. There's so many hog and dairy and eggs, and it just sells for
more money.
Much more money. And here, there's so many acres, and there's only so much demand, and plus the productivity too.
Yep.
We don't get as much rainfall here. We don't have as many heat units. So if you stack it all up, the quality of the land, the rainfall, like the climate, right?
Yep.
And then the crops that you can grow within the time frame that we have to grow here in Western Canada. And then the fact that it's not as scarce as the land in Southern Ontario, it creates this huge spread. But still makes you wonder, why is the spread that big? It's a huge spread that we have at the present time, and either their prices will come down or ours will go up. I'm not sure which is going to happen. So,
Interesting that you say that. A value of a parcel of land, an acre, let's call it that. External factors. It's not just the dirt that has the value, but external factors like weather actually dictate what a piece of land can be worth.
For sure.
Which I'm assuming can vary over the province of Saskatchewan too.
It does, for sure. Yeah, because with this northeast part of Saskatchewan typically is the wettest. So theoretically it should produce more crop. Now it does cost more. You need more combines. You need more iron, right? You need more people. You need dryers and all that. That's generalizing, but in general, you need more equipment and manpower to seed and harvest the same number of acres in the northeast compared to the southwest. But definitely productivity expectation is everything. That's really what it boils down to. What can you sort of expect to produce on a piece of land, whether it's 100 acres in southern Ontario or
Yeah.
a quarter section out here.
Right.
Actually, Harry, I got a question for you on this topic. You've kind of answered these, but you being a realtor, you know that residential real estate is built on comps of that area, square footage, amenities, upgrades to the house. That's how that comp is.
Yes.
In commercial real estate, it's based out of a lease rate combined with square footage, location, and you come up with a fair price of what you can lease it out for. So what you've kind of touched on a lot of these, but if you could sum up like how you actually come to a land per acre, cost per acre of farmland, maybe just summarize kind of the things you just
Like all the factors that I included,
Yeah. Okay. So if someone calls and says, "Hey, Harry, we've got 10 quarters of land that we're looking at selling, we're looking to retire, or we've retired already, and we're looking," but first of all, we want to know what the value is. So what we'll do is we'll roll up our sleeves and do what we call an EOV, an estimate of value. And what we do is we pull information off of different websites, and we also pull information from the Farmland Security Board, which is a comparable sales, to do our comparable sales analysis. So here in Saskatchewan, here we're very fortunate. There's a database that's quite robust, and it's highly valuable to the banks, all of the lenders, as well as appraisers and real estate agents and lawyers. So it's a big part of what we do. So we look at the land on paper, so to speak. If there are improvements, let's say there was a house and a barn, then we make a visit out to the farm usually to have a look and at the improvements. But as far as just the bare land, just the land part of it goes, and that's usually the largest component of it. We learn about it on paper once we have the legal land descriptions. And we do our comparative market analysis with the Farmland Security Board data. And then we do some other reading between the lines, so to speak. We look at, because the Farmland Security Board data, usually, most of the appraisers I've talked to say they usually use a pretty tight radius around the land. It's similar if you had a house. I say a house, you're going to look at houses in the same or same area of the city.
Sure. Yep.
With this, we try to cast have a broader view of it. And so what would land, let's say in Oxbow clay loam, nice black soil, near Oxbow, let's say it's near Yorkton or it's in the Aberneth area. What would it, we look around further from just where the land itself is located to get a feel for what that similar quality land is sold for in other parts of the province. And then we come up with our range of values. So it's a range. We'll have kind of a high and a low because there's no way to know because it's so, land 10 miles away, just access to a type of roads it has. There's quite a few variables that go into it. And in the house, in the city, you can come pretty close to within a few $1,000s as to what an estimate of what. Like, let's say you asked me to market your house in the city. Yeah, we can get pretty close as to where it's going to sell. Farmland, there's a broader range,
right? And you're probably a farm goes up for sale too. You're dealing with different areas of land, and I said like all the external factors but 10,000 acre farm. This is spread of land over a big area, right? So I mean, those like you said, you find a range, but like the range is going to be on the high side, certainly say in this one area, and on the low side maybe in another area. So you got a tough job, buddy.
Well, you know what? If it was that easy, everybody would be doing it, right?
There you go. Right on.
We love what we're doing, and it's a lot of fun, and you know what? It's challenging every day. There's something new. It's kind of like I always used to say with farming, there's something new to learn every day. Well, it's the same with this business, and it depends who we're trying to sort of assist. So let's say you're looking at, that was the seller. Now, if you're looking to buy land, let's say you're from Ontario or from Calgary or from the UK or even from some other part of Saskatchewan, and you want to buy land, and you're looking for an agent that knows the industry and understands, now I'm representing a buyer to try to help the buyer understand all the variables. So there's a lot to it. And our business revolves around people being happy, and at the end of the day, they tell their friends, they tell their, the word spreads, right? If Sheppard Realty have done a good job for them, they're going to tell other folks. So, of course, our goal is to make sure our buyer clients coming from out of province or even within the province get it right the first time when they buy, because the last thing we want is someone buying and then being unhappy with the land. So so we try to make sure they're aware of the good, the bad, and the ugly. I mean, if there's things about it that aren't great, we tell them. We don't. So it depends on if we're assisting a buyer or a seller, but a lot of the same things apply. I mean, the seller is looking to get as much money as possible. It's a one-time liquidity event. They're looking to us to maximize the value.
Get the exposure, all that kind of stuff.
For sure. And when they're buying, they want to buy as right as they can. That's healthy, of course.
Absolutely.
So does a seller have to provide a buyer with historical yields of crop on those lands? Is that part of the transaction?
Don't have to, but it sure helps.
Yeah.
So usually 3 to 5 years is about right. So let's say you're looking to buying a section of land that we've got listed. One of the things that would be ideal for me to be able to provide you would be a 3 to 5 year crop history showing what crops are growing. Ideally, all of the herbicides, fungicides have been applied, but usually people just want to know, hey, was the canola, was it Roundup Ready or was it Liberty Link? If it was wheat, was it a soft white or hard red? If it was lentils, were they Clearfield or not? So, I think in the future, I think it's going to become really paramount. In fact, I think the future's actually now. I think realistically, if I could give landowners, good advice would be keep lots of records, keep great records as to what you're doing on your land, because I think in the future it's going to become even more important come liquidity event time, sale time, whatever, whether you pass away or you decide to get out of the business, you just want to sell and move the money somewhere else, that you can provide, if I'm your agent, you can provide me with as much data and information as you can about what you've done, and then I can pass that on to the buyer, and it just adds value. Odds are you're going to end up with more money for your land if you do that.
Hard empirical evidence that shows what the land is capable of. And so,
well, what's happened on it, because that's really the big thing. What have you actually done on it in the last, let's say, 10 years? So to be able to provide that, and then the other thing is a lot of people want to know, well, what are the yields? What will the land produce? I mean, that's the challenge. There is that not everybody does the same thing, right? So we've seen a lot of land, when people sell it and gets in the hands of one of the, let's say high-end farmers that are just absolutely doing best in class job. Lots of times the yields will bump a lot. So
is that right?
So somebody says, okay, what's the land been? Well, it was producing 40 bushel canola. Well, you get it in other hands with more fertilizer and better equipment, better seed placement, everything. You're going to be looking at 50 bushel an acre instead of 40. So
interesting how the value of the land can go up just with that buyer. Like them purchasing it. The efficiencies in the equipment and their operations actually increase the yield of the field. And if they ever go to sell, which in our day and age, if you're getting to a farm that size, you're typically in it for the long haul, which actually leads me to my next question. For you and the boys, what is the biggest trend from a buyer standpoint that you've seen lately? Now, are buyers coming in? Are they relocating or from a different country, from a different area of Canada, or do you typically see a buyer as an established operation growing in the area?
Yeah. The bulk of the buying is just what the last that you said. It's local farmers buying. They'll pick up halves, quarters, sections, and even bigger blocks if they come available. But that they can fit into their existing operations. So that's by far number one, the biggest buyer pool right now. The smaller investors have pretty much dried up. They're not extinct, so to speak. But we used to deal with a lot of people. They have anywhere from 500, let's say, thousand to $1.5 million or $2 million. Sort of the smaller cap investors. But they need the numbers to work, and with 6 to 8% interest rates, cash rent has increased a lot, but it hasn't increased as much as the price of the land and the cost of the money. So it's pretty much taken that buyer group out of the market with our current interest rate environment. And still some bigger investors. There's still guys that are looking, but they're watching the interest rates too.
Well, of course,
boils down to cash flow. So. But I would say the farmers, because farmers going to kind of justify paying the premium for that land. It's kind of a one-time event in a lifetime. It comes up for sale, and it's right on the doorstep, and so you've got to compete for it, right? So,
like you said, the quantity of land for sale has gone down. So, I mean, when it comes up and again, like he said, it's right on your doorstep. That's when it's time to act. So from a seller, go ahead.
I was going to say the other buyer pool is out of province, money relocating. So let's say farmers in Southern Ontario. We've seen a fair bit of that. Southern Ontario farmers, because the land values have gone
so they get their money down there and they bring it over
there, bring it over here. Some of them don't like the busy, like down, what we've been told is that it's, with so much urban activity, the roads are cluttered and it's hard to move. It's more
Yep.
difficult. Whereas out here in the West, we have great roads. Our roads are wonderful, really. I grew up, in the 60s and roads were okay, but they were nothing like they are today.
Right,
So
yeah.
we've got these wonderful roads for getting big iron around, and a lot of people in the East kind of appreciate what we've got going out here with
Yes.
not many people around, not many vehicles, and it makes
Yep.
farming a lot easier. So,
Yeah, bigger skies, flatter land. Like, not to say it's not flat over in Ontario, but I know in another episode I was, I was telling the guests that, like, when I first got out here and started to drive south with one of the salesmen here to meet a few customers. Like, you get south on number 6 here, I mean, you can see 4 miles.
Oh, yeah,
Like,
it's
it is
flat.
flat.
Yeah.
And all workable land. Like, I mean, there's the very, very minimal tree clumps here and there. Like, I mean, you get over into Manitoba and like, there's some areas where you can drive through and it's more forest or woodlands and wetlands than it is prairies. But there's a lot of farmable land here. Same question, Harry, from the seller's perspective. Now, I know we probably went through a phase, when we're talking like 80s, 90s, where like, there was a farmyard in every quarter section pretty much. Eventually they sold off into the, the mom and paws that wanted to get up to maybe that 5, 6, 7,000 acre size or whatever. They're still around today. Great customers. I mean, I'd say we got the best farmers in the world here in Saskatchewan, but from a seller standpoint, is that what you're seeing mainly sell off at this point, like bigger packages, or is there a lot of onesie twosie, like quarter section here, quarter section there, half section there?
Sure. Yeah. The majority of them are smaller packages.
Right.
We've in the last year and a half, our biggest package was 125 quarter sections. So it was huge.
Wow.
Yeah. But the majority of them are two sections, 2 quarters,
Gotcha.
Anywhere from 1 to 8 quarters, I would say somewhere in there is the average.
Yeah. So sorry to interrupt you. So I guess just to answer my question, so you don't see many of the, like, I mean, if they're that 5,000 acre, 6,000 acre, they're typically here to stay right now. It's a generational farm.
They are, but just in the last year, wasn't one of our listings, but there've been a couple listings that, owners of 5,000 plus acres have decided for whatever reason to sell, whether it's to sell there and buy over here, but there've been a few larger ones, but lately not as many as there have been in the past.
Yep.
So now whether that'll change as, with current conditions, I mean, nobody knows what's coming, of course, but with commodity prices having dropped somewhat and interest rates staying relatively high, there's it's possible there could be a few more of those larger farms come on the market in the near future here, but certainly the smaller blocks are the ones that make up the bulk of what's available.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Be nice to get your hands on some of the bigger ones that comes out, which you probably do already. Yeah.
Like it is. No, for our business. Yeah.
Nice. Sheppard Realty. We didn't touch on that during your history, so I'd like to circle back. 2016 made the decision to start up your own brokerage. I guess it was. Yeah.
Yes.
Your sons are involved, which is great.
For sure.
What sparked it? I mean, you were in the real estate business since 2000. I guess you reemerged in 2010. It was just your love of farmland. You just, I love your entrepreneurial, spirit and wanting to start something new. But was there something else other than that wit that made that decision for you?
It's kind of a logical progression in some ways. What happens, a lot of people that get into the industry, in the real estate industry, I believe it's 2 years you have to practice under another broker. So you can't just sort of, go through the examination process and be registered and start on your own. You have to work underneath another brokerage, which I did for 6 years. So we looked at the opportunities and the risks and the rewards, and we felt, it looked like a smart thing to do to branch out on our own. We used our family name because I already had 6 years of sort of brand building. And so, we've been building on that. And so we've been building the Sheppard Realty brand for, 14 years now. And thankfully we've been able to, attract lots of sellers and buyers. We've dealt with big and small alike. But none are too big or too small. We don't, we're very diligent about have a high bar of professionalism to take really good care of our clients. We're always working to educate ourselves to be better equipped to to serve our clients better, both the buyers and sellers. And
Excellent. When you started in 2016, when did the boys come aboard?
Well, Justin was when I was a Sutton Group Results Realty in Regina
Yep.
here. That's where we started. So he was an agent. So he kind of worked for us while he was an agent with Sutton while we were both there. And then
Gotcha.
And youngest son Devin, he put himself through university, the U of R.
Oh, wow.
Business admin. Yeah, and he worked for us part time while he went to university. And
Oh, good for him.
So when he graduated from U of R, then he worked on. Then he got his license, and now he's our associate broker. So
Oh, wow. Good
Yeah.
for him. Oh,
Yeah.
that's awesome. And I just love hearing about, family enterprises and succession
Mm-hmm.
plans and that sort of thing. And I have to admit, the reason I bring it up is, we talk about exposure for your customers, that sort of thing. Are the guys as a generation or a younger generation doing more with social media for exposure and different ways of marketing the Sheppard name, other than, like just the, signs, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, they bring the younger generation has much more knowledge of and awareness of social media and,
Sure,
and
yeah.
how to make it work. I guess I consider myself more the sort of the older school brick and mortar. So I'm more, the radio ad on CKRM every day at,
Yep.
noon and,
Yeah.
signs and Western Producer, but they're into all these other social media,
Yeah.
Google and YouTube, and so
Yeah.
I leave that up to them. They're doing a great job with it. Our goal is just to keep our stick on the ice and keep taking good care of people and let
Yeah.
the rest take care of itself. And it seems to be working so
Awesome.
far.
Well, that's what it comes
So-
down to. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in that, like, do they say you get a listing for a farm, and the YouTube aspect of it, a lot of digital videos and visuals are, the key to, well, we do a lot of it, for marketing our used equipment and even our new, even our new iron. So, drone footage, that sort of stuff. Are you doing that kind of stuff with the
bet.
listings? Yeah.
Devin's out there today working on.
Oh, is that
listing
right?
Up at Watson, yeah, drone footage, putting up the signs.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. So we try to drone everything we list. Sometimes we list it and it sells before we get out to drone it, but that's
Oh, is
not
that
too
right?
common. But
Yeah.
we like to get drone footage of everything. We've sold some farms with some beautiful houses on them, so we usually hire professionals to come in and do 3D imagery and do videos and to really showcase the houses, right? But as far as the land itself goes, we run drones across it, and then we've got a guy in the city that does our kind of, I don't know what all he does, but he gets it ready.
The
so it's
editing
on.
and
There
all
you
this.
go. There
I
you go.
gotcha.
Yeah. So
I'm learning these terms as I go too, right? And I'm already in your son's generation, so
yeah.
Oh, that's good stuff.
Oh, so we have been for quite some time with drone footage it's a big part of it. Yeah. And also when we prepare information on a farm, let's say there's 125 quarters, that's our biggest one, Dave, but there's a lot of land, right? Tremendous amount of
shit ton of
information.
land,
So
yeah.
we basically have to roll up our sleeves. We have some tech people, so it isn't just the boys and I and my wife. So there's the four of us, but we have a number of other employees. A couple of them we call them our tech people. So they're diligently day in, day out working on all the parcels that we're looking at doing estimates of value for, and they go on the websites and pull information, and we've got well organized spreadsheets and basically put PDFs together that are try to showcase the property, whether it's 125 quarters plus about 6 yard sites, in that case it was, and barns and houses, in a manner that you can open it up on your phone or on your computer and you can get a pretty good idea what's there without having to waste a bunch of time and sort through a bunch of, so
That's
we try to
huge.
make it as easy to understand. I'm sure it's there's some iterations ahead. I'm sure we'll be evolving and iterating as we go, but we've got a pretty good process for pulling together information and be able to show a prospective buyer.
Sure. So, and that single shot, as you said, because that's huge. Like, I mean, as soon as it gets convoluted with too many places to go and that sort of thing, it not that a buyer of your caliber and your company's caliber would lose interest quick, but I mean, it sure is nice to have that one shot. Have you got a calculator on you? Or handy? What's an acreage on 125 quarters? 168 acres a quarter.
20,000 roughly. I don't
20,000. Yeah, 20,000. That'll work. Yeah.
125 times 160. I'm so used to the calculator.
Right. Yeah.
I'll tell you what, Harry's an expert because it's exactly 20,000.
Is it really?
Oh, are you serious? Oh my goodness. Okay.
There you go,
That's
bud.
amazing. Yeah. You got to buy a lottery ticket today.
Yeah, that was bang on.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, that is like a 20,000 acre farm. Like, I mean, you just don't see many of those in Manitoba. Here you do. Like, I mean, they're more.
They're pretty uncommon though. Really.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's plenty of farmers that
Sure.
own and farm a lot more than that.
Yeah.
as far as that many acres
Yeah.
in one listing. It's kind of like having 125 houses in the city, all
Literally.
in one listing. Literally is what it is. So.
Yeah. Yeah. So if I could ask, and I mean, not mentioning any names, what sparks for a seller, like of, like a farmer, a farm operation of that size, what sparked a sale that big? Like, is it just that, their next generation son, daughters don't want to be involved with the farm, or is it their...
Well, in that case, the folks were from Alberta, and
Yep.
they're into a lot of other things. This was part of one of their businesses, and so I think the date on the calendar was they
Gotcha.
just got to the point where it just wasn't a fit for their business anymore, and so it was time to sell it.
Yeah.
So
that's
everyone's
nice
different. Everyone,
Yeah.
Some people will never sell an acre of land in their lifetime. Just
Yep.
and going to happen. Other people are planning on selling all their acres in their lifetime, and others plan to sell maybe some.
Yeah.
There's a lot of reasons why people sell: divorces, death, debt, discouragement, date on the calendar.
Yeah.
But there's no land for sale other than if something sort of clicks or changes. It sort of now we should do this.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
yeah, it's just a big, you don't hear many of them go for sale at that size. And it's just so intriguing. It's so intriguing to hear, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like, I mean, that size of parcel of land or there are many parcels of land that would equal to that. So,
we listed that one in 2022, I guess it was. And then, and then it took us about roughly a year, not quite, I guess, to get a deal put together. But those are they're all fun, actually. I mean, we're working on a deal right now for 5 quarters. It's fun. It really is. And the people that are looking to buy it are excited as can be, and the sellers are happy. And, so anywhere from 5, doesn't matter what size they are. We roll up our sleeves and apply the same, the same attention to detail to the regardless of the size.
Sure.
We've got people we sell 1 quarter for, and we put more work into that, and sometimes in a 10 or 20 quarter
is
parcel.
that right, eh?
No kidding. Yeah. Just not, there's just different things.
Yeah.
About each one of these, they're all unique. Every
deal is different.
Every parcel is different.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
So Harry, have you ever seen any deals where a current farm wants to accumulate land in a specific area, and they have to approach someone who owns that land that may not be interested in selling,
right,
and give them almost a deal they can't refuse? Is that a world that we live in here? Does that happen?
Oh yeah, for sure. It does. I mean, we only kind of scratch the tip of the iceberg, really. I mean, there's so much going on out there in the land space, and there's private deals. But we're here in Regina. We're part of the Regina, business community, but we sell all across the province, and I'm active in Manitoba as well. Yep. And it's kind of lost my train of thought there for a second.
No, that's okay. So you still can broker deals, like someone can approach a farmer, but they still they could get you to approach someone who has potential land and say, hey, I could potentially broker this deal for you. Or
we've done it a number of times. It's pretty low odds. We've had some success. We have had some success where, farmer wants to expand. They've identified some land. They ask us to, roll up our sleeves and see if we can put a deal together. So, so most of the time you strike out because, most of the time you get out there, no, not interested. That's okay. It's their land, and I respect it highly. And,
absolutely. Yeah.
But it does work in some cases, but it is a low probability play for sure. But
there's got to be a point where you know where to walk away, because, like, I mean, even you probably get excited, as I would, if you're representing someone, and just go knock on the door and get the fucking number, like just whatever they'll pay, get the number, right? And they still say no, right? But I mean, that's like, I mean, as you said, some people just don't want to sell.
No, for sure. And you know what? I've learned in this business, a number of things, but certainly respecting highly both, the people that own the land, you just respect them highly, and what they if they have no interest in selling, or if they're only a seller if certain terms are met, that's great, because it's their property, and the buyer, it's their hard-earned money that's going to take to buy the land and pay for it. And so,
what's the most unique piece of land that you've been involved in a deal with? And whether it doesn't have to be either a buyer representing a buyer or a seller, but like the land for whatever reason just blew you away.
Oh boy, that's a tough one. We've had so many really interesting ones. I guess there was a 9-quarter parcel up on the north, just on southwest of Saskatoon, right along the Saskatchewan River, and this fellow called me up. This would be back during the pandemic, 2020, right about now, and he said, "Yeah, I'm thinking of selling," because date on the calendar was time, right? So it was all in grass, pretty darn dry that year. Got up there and looked at it and met him and looked around and, we dreamt a whole bunch and put a big price tag on it. As it turned out, wasn't out in left field by any means.
Really?
Yeah. And you know what? The guy that bought it, he put pivots on it. I mean, he took that and he brought in the power, he got the permits for irrigation. We helped him. We actually, and there's a point where we pass it off to the buyer, but we help. Our goal is to be as valuable as we possibly can along the way until they don't need us anymore. And of course, then because we're busy and we got other things to do, but we're more than willing to kind of assist. So that was one that it was all about getting sort of permitted for irrigation, because the land would have only been worth like a fraction of what we sold it for if it would have just been dry land. But the fact that it would work for irrigation was pretty neat, and to see the pivots go on it, and
so what was he growing? Was he growing anything under the pivots, or was he just like
no? When it was sold, so when we sold it with irrigation potential, the guy that bought it saw the potential. So it was in grass. It was all in tame hay. It was all being grazed.
Oh, okay, I got you. For livestock.
For livestock.
I got you. Okay, yeah.
So then the guy that bought it, his vision was, we're going to buy it, we're going to spray it out, we're going to do whatever, and we're going to seed it, and we're going to put pivots on it. And that's exactly what we did. He had canola growing on it the next year, had a great crop. So,
unbelievable. You probably don't see.
Pretty neat.
Yeah, absolutely. And a great example. You probably don't see much of it anymore, but I got to ask, have parcels of land that have zero, how do I word this, that have not been worked ever? Like, I mean, that are just as is. That's the way the land has been for, Yeah. You see a lot of that?
Do you see a lot change hands?
They just see, because I mean, going back to our, the increase in farmable acres and farmers now, whether they're aiming to sell, whether that they're staying, they're going to turn as much of their land into workable as possible. Yeah. So if there's a section that hasn't been worked ever, but has the potential to be worked, it's kind of hard not to, to work that land. So, I mean, is there just... Do you see much of that anymore, of the unworked as it was, 2, 3, 4, forever, 100 years ago?
Yeah. There is, for sure, some being broke up. I mean, I'd say more in Manitoba. I'd say the percentages from from reading and listening, and it seems like there's been a higher percentage of native grass being tilled for crop production in Manitoba than in Saskatchewan. Like out of all of the native grass acres, there'd be higher percentage there and here. Not comparing, but I'm just, because I'm involved in both provinces.
Yeah.
There's a case to be built for just leaving the native grass alone. There really and truly is. There's so many grass species. There's birds and animals that thrive on native grass. Yeah. A lot of the native grass it's hilly, or it's rocky, or it's sloughy, and really not breaking it up in my mind is, I'm not a tree hugger. Realistically, I see some value in unless the native grass unless the ground, the quarter, let's say the quarter section is kind of primo. It's not hilly. It's really good quality ground. Not too many rocks. The guy that owned, or people have owned it for 100 years, let's say, they just had cattle, so they never broke it up. Those quarters, and those are the kind that typically do get broke up. But there's some pretty marginal ground that, could still be broke up. But my thinking is leave it and
just don't touch it. Yeah,
and farm the good stuff.
Yeah,
farm it well, and let someone with livestock run the cattle or the sheep or whatever they want to graze on the native and
the unbroken stuff. And the only reason I asked, going back to Pop's coming home when we came out here and back to ground zero, as you said, he always told stories about him and his brothers and sisters running around on that native ground and like finding arrowheads and stuff like that, like super like ancient artifacts, like just crazy to hear about that kind of stuff.
And stone like rings where the TP rings, I guess they're called. So there's been a lot of that lost, of course. I mean, of course, tilled, but that's another reason, if land is still in its natural state, to leave it because of some of that.
That's stuff you can find. So amazing. Thank you very much for coming today. I really appreciate stopping by. I've learned a lot, and as far as the process of land values, and so thank you for that. Jim, producer Jay, do you have anything that you'd like to add?
No, you know what? I'd like to ask you who you think's going to win the Stanley Cup.
Oilers.
Go Oilers.
We got an Oilers fan. Okay, I'm with you. I'd like to see that.
Yeah. What happened in Game 1?
I don't know.
That's tonight.
Or is it tonight?
It is tonight.
It is tonight, yeah.
Yeah.
You see how much of a sports guy I am. I don't watch that much sports, admittedly. I'll watch the last game of the year in any division. I'm into car racing. I'm a big F1 fan, but yeah, I'll get on board.
Yeah.
Go Oilers.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, for sure.
We need their goaltender to keep it solid for the next
Yeah.
2 series, and we'll be okay.
Yeah,
Awesome.
exactly. Yeah. If I could just give you a couple other. if you have
Absolutely.
time for
Yeah,
this,
absolutely.
I just want to say that appraisals, one thing that I've learned over the past, especially the last 4 or 5 years, is the value of having appraisals on your land.
Yeah.
Even if you have no intention of actually, or if you want to expand.
Yeah.
A lot of people think that you go for a mortgage and then the bank will do an appraisal, they'll hire someone. But a tip I could give people is get your appraisal, hire a highly qualified appraiser, and then you can take that appraisal to the bank, the Farm Credit Union. You can actually, and they'll, I believe all of the financial institutions will use appraisals that are done by an Appraisal Institute of Canada certified appraiser. So it's kind of a tip for landowners, even if you're not looking to expand or sell, but to actually have an appraisal done from time to time. And some people get it done every year. Some of the large institutions get it done every 6 months. But and other things that we've done too that we've been able to add value to our especially our buyer clients is we hired a tax lawyer in Saskatoon a number of years ago to work on a joint venture agreement for us. And then we've been able to share that with some of our clients. So if they're looking to, let's say, buy a large tract and they maybe didn't want to farm it all, or they couldn't buy it all, they want to have someone come in and share the deal, then you could use a joint venture agreement as one option instead of just a cash rent agreement. So
interesting.
It's really important for tax purposes that tax plays a huge part in everything, of course. And with the land values having skyrocketed, the number of millions of dollars that are involved in these in some of these farms, taxation is huge. So having a great tax lawyer, I think is the other thing, a really good tip. Tax lawyers, they understand the tax code very well, and a good tax accountant, of course, and sometimes a tax lawyer can be worth their weight in gold. So what we do at Sheppard Realty, we try to sort of bring together a good mix. Like, we're not lawyers, we're not accountants. We try to know as much as we can, but then if someone needs a good tax lawyer, an accountant, or an appraiser, we can refer them.
You can put that in the right direction. I was just going to ask if Sheppard Realty offers those services, like not in-house per se, but certainly, like, I mean, if someone were listening and wanted to reach out, they could, and you could point them in the right direction.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And the appraisal thing, I mean, that goes back to what we were talking about is, the expansion of already existing land. Like, I mean, if a farmer's got a piece that had a bit of treat area somewhere and they're dozing it over and making more workable land, I'm assuming it's just going to raise the value there. So, I mean, that's all part and parcel to getting appraisals, if it's not every year, once every couple of years.
Well, on that point, so the other a step to take is to actually get the land reassessed. So let's say you bought 10,000 acres, okay? 10,000, we'll just use that. And let's say you improved 5% of it. So that's 500 acres. Now you've got 500 acres more arable, farmable land. The smart thing to do is to get it assessed by SAMA. So Saskatchewan Assessment Management Agency, they're responsible for assessing agricultural properties, and that's how the taxes are calculated. But when people are looking to buy and sell land, they use the assessed value of it sort of to be able to compare one package to another. And so it does show more value if your land is assessed higher with SAMA. It actually looks, especially if you're looking to sell, if you're looking for so let's say you're thinking of selling in the next 5 years. Let's say either you or grandpa or your dad had improved the land. There was an extra 500 acres in cultivated acres in addition to what the SAMA field sheets show. Best thing, it doesn't cost you anything. You can actually go to your RM administrator. They'll start the process, and you can actually get the land all re-inspected.
Oh, wow.
Yep. And
so that's a free service to anybody.
As long as there's a bit of a bump, because you see the cost is the incremental cost each year on the taxes, but it's nothing if you're going to be selling in a year or two, but it does show value. So
gotcha.
Because everyone has this data, the SAMA's website is available to everyone. Appraisers use it, realtors use it, everybody uses it.
Yeah.
So being able to prove up your assessed value is actually really critical. And,
yeah.
and so then the appraiser would use that in an appraisal. So then there'd be an extra $2 or $3 or $4 or $5 million of value there because of this I think it's called reassessment. But anyway, Sam re-inspects it, and then they will adjust the assessments, and it shows more value. So that's a zero cost tip. It's the best one you can.
Yeah,
you know,
easy one to do, especially if it's a free service to to a resident or landowner. Yeah, there you go. Mm-hmm. Yeah, good stuff.
Good.
Well, I really appreciate coming by today, Harry. It was a pleasure meeting you. And
Thank you. You too.
Any of our listeners out there, if you're looking to buy, sell farmland, Harry's your guy, and the boys, I might say. I gotta give them a plug. Yeah,
love to hear from anyone.
Family owned and operated company as Mazer Group is, so we share that aspect when looking after our customers. So thank you again for coming, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay.
Bye.
Take care.